Welcome to the Nameless.
I thought it was the wind until it said my name. The sound came from just outside the cabin, drifting through the trees and pressing against the walls like a breath looking for a way in. At first, I barely registered it. The mountains were full of noises at night, wood popping, branches shifting, the low whistle of air moving through gaps you couldn't see. I lay there staring at the dark ceiling, half asleep, telling myself that was all it was. Then the sound shaped itself into something clearer. It wasn't loud, it wasn't rushed. It said my name slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake the house. The way a person would speak if they were standing a few feet away and didn't want to scare you. My body went completely still. I remember noticing how quiet my own breathing sounded in my head, how my chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath longer than I realized. I didn't turn my head. I didn't sit up. I just stared into the darkness and waited for the sound to fade. It didn't. I went up to the cabin because I needed space, or at least that was the version I gave everyone else. The real reason was harder to explain without sounding dramatic. My life had flattened out. A long relationship had ended without a fight or a clear reason. My job had gone remote, and days started blending together in a way that made me uneasy. I wanted somewhere quiet enough that my thoughts would have room to settle. My uncle owned a cabin in the mountains that he rarely used anymore. He'd bought it years ago as a weekend place, then stopped going once the drive started to feel longer than the rest was worth. When I asked if I could stay there for a few weeks, he hesitated just long enough for me to notice. He warned me about the isolation, the lack of cell service, the weather changing quickly up there. Then he gave me the keys. The drive took nearly the entire day. The highway gave way to smaller roads, then to a narrow stretch of asphalt that twisted up the mountain like it had been laid there reluctantly. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall and close together, their tops disappearing into low clouds. The radio lost its signal somewhere near the halfway point, leaving me alone with the hum of the engine and the sound of gravel under the tires. About an hour from the cabin, I passed a sign on the side of the road. It was old, rusted around the edges, and half hidden by weeds. It named a town I'd never heard of. There were no other signs pointing to it, no indication it was still active. Through the trees, I caught glimpses of dark shapes that might have been buildings. They looked slumped, unfinished, like they'd grown tired of standing. The cabin itself sat alone on a ridge, set back from the road and surrounded by trees. One side dropped away sharply, offering a wide view of forested hills rolling into the distance. It was small but solid, built from thick logs that had darkened with age. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell hit me first. Dust, old wood, pine cleaner, and something faintly metallic underneath it all. Everything worked. The generator started easily, the lights flickered, then steadied. The water ran cold and clear. There were no signs of animals getting inside. No broken windows, no damage. It felt reassuringly normal. I unpacked slowly, letting the quiet settle around me. The first 2 days passed without incident. I worked during the mornings, laptop set up at the small table by the window. In the afternoons, I walked the trails behind the cabin, old paths that wound through the trees and disappeared into the mountain. The silence felt heavy but peaceful, broken only by birds and the distant rush of wind through the canopy. At night, I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that leaves you disoriented when you wake. On the third evening, I came back from a walk to find the front door unlocked. I stood there longer than necessary, keys still in my hand, staring at the handle. I was sure I'd locked it. I had a habit of checking, of turning the knob twice to make sure. After a moment, I told myself I must have forgotten. Being alone did strange things to routines. I pushed the door open and stepped inside.
Nothing was out of place. My bag sat where I'd left it, the lights were off, the air smelled the same as always.
I checked the back door, the windows, even the small storage shed outside. Everything else was secure. I locked the door and tried not to think about it. That night, the wind sounded different. Not stronger, just more focused, like it kept returning to the same spot. It brushed against the side of the cabin, then pulled away, then came back again. At some point, half asleep, I thought I heard footsteps on the porch. The boards creaked once, then again, slow and deliberate. I waited for a knock that never came. The next morning, I noticed shallow impressions in the dirt near the steps. They weren't clear enough to make out any details, just shapes that could have been mine from earlier. Still, they bothered me. I started locking the door every time I came inside, even if I was just stepping out for a minute. On the fourth day, while I was working, there was a knock. 3 taps, light but intentional.
The buildings sat in a shallow dip in the land, clustered together as if they'd drawn closer over time. A general store stood near the road, its sign faded and crooked. Inside, the shelves were bare, the floor covered in debris. In the back, I found a corkboard with yellowed papers pinned to it. Notices, names, dates. I didn't read them closely. Standing there made my skin crawl, like I was intruding on something private. When I returned to the cabin, it was already dark. The porch light was on. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, keys in my hand, staring at the warm circle of light spilling onto the ground. I was sure I'd turned it off when I left. For a moment, the cabin felt less like shelter and more like something watching me. I laughed quietly at the thought and forced myself to go inside. That was the night I heard the voice clearly. It came after midnight. I was awake, reading, when the wind dropped away entirely. The silence was sudden and complete, so deep it made my ears ring. Then, from somewhere near the trees, came a sound that didn't belong. A slow inhale. A pause. My name. It was spoken softly, almost kindly, as if the voice were trying not to startle me. I didn't respond. I sat there, frozen, staring at the door. Eventually, the wind returned, bringing with it the usual mountain noises. I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next few days, it kept happening. Always at night, always from outside. Sometimes it was just my name. Other times, it sounded like someone practicing, stretching the syllables out, getting them slightly wrong. Once, I heard it from the direction of the old town, faint but unmistakable. I started keeping the lights on after dark. I avoided going outside alone. I told myself I would leave early, cut the trip short. But every time I thought about packing up, a strange hesitation settled in. It felt like leaving something unfinished, though I couldn't explain what. One afternoon, I came back from a walk to find the back door wide open. Cold air filled the cabin, carrying the sharp scent of pine. I checked every room. Nothing was missing. On the table, my notebook lay open to a page I didn't remember writing on. In my handwriting, over and over, was my name. That night, the voice came closer. It wasn't louder, just nearer, muffled slightly by the cabin walls. It said my name, then added something else, a word I almost recognized. I pressed my ear to the wall, heart pounding, and realized it wasn't speaking to me. It was calling, like someone trying to coax something out of hiding. At dawn, without fully understanding why, I walked back to the town. Fog hung low between the buildings, muting sound and distance. In the center, there was a shallow depression in the ground, ringed with stones. Standing at its edge made my head feel light, like a memory trying to surface. That night, the knocking returned. 3 careful taps. The voice followed, closer than ever. It said my name the way my mother used to, soft and familiar. I stood in the middle of the cabin, bags packed, keys in my pocket. The door rattled slightly, not from force, but from something leaning against it, listening. The knocking stopped. The voice answered with my name again, complete and certain. I left at first light. I didn't look back. As I passed the town sign, I saw my name carved into the wood beneath it, fresh and deep. I told my uncle I wouldn't be using the cabin again. He didn't ask why. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear my name carried on it. Not from outside, but from somewhere closer, like it's already learned how to wait.